Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide. A reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that when Brigham Young spoke during the first solemn assembly to a congregation of nearly 6,000 saints, many testified that he looked and sounded like the prophet Joseph Smith, giving them confidence he was to be the Lord's chosen leader. Learn how Brigham Young served 10 missions before becoming president of the church and led the saints more than 1,000 miles west to the Salt Lake Valley. Discover that Brigham Young's final recorded words before his death were simply, "Joseph, Joseph," reflecting his lifelong love and respect for the prophet Joseph Smith. So if you picture a 19th century frontier leader, somebody who survived mobs, crossed frozen rivers, and basically built an empire out in the desert.
Yeah, you probably picture a pretty ruthless, hardened guy.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
The classic gritty frontiersman. You definitely do not picture a man who is actively advocating for women to go to medical school.
No, not at all.
Or, telling parents to never raise their voices at their toddlers.
It completely goes against the stereotype.
It really does. But today, we're looking at a stack of sources that completely dismantle that whole image. We're going to explore the exact moment that an unexpected leader stepped into this impossible void.
Right, a massive leadership vacuum.
And we're going to look at the literally documented miracle that cemented his authority and the deeply progressive philosophy he used to keep his people alive. So our mission in this deep dive is to head back to Nauvoo, Illinois, the summer of 1844.
A really intense time.
Yeah, to understand this moment of profound historical whiplash. So to really get the tension of that summer, set the scene for us.
Well, to understand it, we have to look at the immediate context, right? It is August 8th, 1844.
Okay.
And just 6 weeks prior to this, on June 27th, the prophet Joseph Smith and his brother Hyrum were martyred.
Which was just a devastating blow.
Absolutely. And I use the term martyred deliberately because they were murdered by a mob, specifically because of their religious and political leadership.
So the community is just reeling.
Reeling is an understatement.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a community of about 6,000 saints, and that's a historical term for members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they are gathered outdoors.
Just paralyzed by greed.
Paralyzed, yeah. But more dangerously, they're facing a huge leadership vacuum.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because, human nature just abhors a vacuum.
Always.
And in this specific case, the established leadership body, which is the quorum of the 12 apostles, they had been scattered all across the United States and internationally too, right?
Right, they were out on mission.
So as word of the assassinations reached them, they naturally began rushing back to Nauvoo. But before they could all get back, you had unauthorized men stepping forward to basically claim control of the church.
And doing it without consulting the quorum at all, which was the proper authority.
Exactly. Who was the main guy trying to do this?
The most prominent was Sidney Rigdon. So during a morning meeting on that August 8th, he steps up in front of this massive, very vulnerable crowd.
A crowd of 6,000 grieving people.
Exactly. And he claims the title of, quote, guardian of the church.
Guardian.
Yeah. He is essentially attempting a bloodless coup. He's making a play to stand in the place of Joseph Smith.
Wow.
So he speaks at length, and he's maneuvering to call for a sustaining vote from the congregation, because that would formally lock in his power.
It's like the keystone of a massive stone arch being violently pulled out, right? Gravity dictates the whole thing should just crumble into dust immediately.
Right, it should have collapsed.
But instead, someone instantly slides a new, perfectly cut stone into the gap before a single brick can fall.
And that someone is Brigham Young.
Brigham Young.
He is the president of the Quorum of the 12, and he steps in and just completely interrupts Rigdon's momentum.
I love this part. He just shuts it down.
Totally. He asserts absolute authority. He tells the crowd, he says, I will manage this voting for Elder Rigdon. He does not preside here.
Boom.
Yeah. He shuts down the entire gathering and tells everyone to go home and come back in the afternoon for a properly ordered meeting.
And that afternoon meeting, it really is a masterclass in restoring structure out of chaos, isn't it?
It really is. Brigham Young organizes what becomes the very first solemn assembly.
So it wasn't just a loose crowd anymore.
Not at all.
Yeah.
The physical seating arrangement was highly structured. You had at least 7 members of the 12 apostles present.
Okay.
High priests were seated nearby to the right. The 70s were placed at the front. And then the Aaronic priesthood holders were at the rear.
And there were women there too, right?
Yes, the elders were to the right of the 70s, and the sisters were to their left.
I want to pause you there for a second, because for anyone listening who isn't intimately familiar with 19th century church hierarchy,
Sure, yeah.
what does that layout actually accomplish? Like, what is a 70 or an Aaronic priesthood holder?
That's a crucial point to understand. These terms represent different layers and offices of priesthood authority and responsibility.
Okay.
So, for instance, the Aaronic priesthood generally involved more preparatory temporal duties. It was often held by younger men.
Gotcha.
The elders and high priests held higher authority for spiritual administration. And the 70s were specifically designated as traveling ministers or missionaries.
Okay, so it's a very specific breakdown of roles.
Right. And by seating everyone according to their specific ecclesiastical office, Brigham wasn't just organizing a crowd. He was visually and physically reminding this terrified community that divine order still existed.
Oh, that's powerful.
The structure itself was a message. The message was, the church is not broken.
And that structured environment, it really sets the stage for what happens next, which is an undeniable, literal miracle.
Yes. The turning point of the whole crisis.
We have this historical account from George Q. Cannon, who was 15 years old at the time, and he would actually eventually grow up to become an apostle himself.
Right?
And he records that when Brigham Young stood up to speak to that newly ordered congregation, something inexplicable occurred.
It's an amazing account.
Cannon records that it wasn't Brigham's voice echoing over the crowd, it was literally the voice of Joseph Smith.
And it extended beyond just the auditory, which is the wild part.
Yeah.
Cannon's record states that to the eyes of the people, it seemed as though the very person of Joseph Smith stood before them.
It's just incredible.
The physical manifestation was so profound that it was as if Joseph had risen from the dead and was speaking directly to them.
And I think it's so important to point out here, if you're listening to this and wondering, oh, was this just mass grief playing tricks on people? Was it hysteria?
Right. People often assume that.
But no, the sources make it explicitly clear this was a literal event. This actually happened.
Absolutely.
Cannon writes that the Lord gave his people a testimony that left absolutely no room for doubt. They saw it with their natural eyes. They heard it with their natural ears. God provided a tangible witness that pierced their hearts.
It was an absolute fact. And what's really fascinating here is how Brigham Young processed that exact moment.
Yeah, you'd think he'd be taking a victory lap.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You might expect a leader who just experienced that level of divine validation to write about feeling powerful or, victorious over his rivals like Rigdon.
Right, like, look at me, I'm the guy now.
But Brigham's own journal entry from that day focuses entirely on empathy.
Empathy.
Yeah. He wrote, "I arose and spoke to the people. My heart was swollen with compassion towards them, and by the power of the Holy Ghost, even the spirit of the prophets, I was enabled to comfort the hearts of the saints."
Wow. He was just focused on comforting them.
Completely. That drastically changes the framing of the day, I think.
It really does. It wasn't about securing a title at all. It was about stopping the paralysis of grief.
Exactly.
But it's also important to note that this divine confirmation, it wasn't just like spontaneous magic dropping out of the sky.
No, not at all.
It was prophesied, and it was forged through years of really grueling preparation.
The foundation was laid years earlier. I mean, Brigham Young's devotion to Joseph was absolute. He once remarked, he said, "I feel like shouting hallelujah all the time when I think that I ever knew Joseph Smith, the prophet."
Hallelujah all the time. That's real devotion.
Right. And Joseph had actually foreseen this transition. Brigham recorded an evening meeting where he and a few brethren were conversing with Joseph. And after a prayer, Joseph prophesied outright, "The time will come when Brother Brigham Young will preside over this church."
Just flat out said it.
Yes. And notably, Brigham wasn't even in the room when Joseph finished that statement.
But prophecy still requires execution. And the preparation Brigham went through was just a brutal crucible. I mean, before Joseph's death, Brigham served 10 different missions.
10. That's a lot of time away from home.
And in September of 1839, he leaves his family to serve a 2-year mission in England.
Which was incredibly difficult back then.
Right. So I have to ask, how does traversing the Atlantic and managing a massive overseas mission in the 1830s prepare someone for leading a pioneer migration?
Well, it essentially forces you to become a logistical genius.
Okay, how so?
On that mission to England, he wasn't just preaching on street corners. He was organizing transatlantic voyages for thousands of converts to come to America.
Oh, wow.
He was managing funds, he was printing materials, and he was coordinating mass movements of people, all under immense resource constraints.
So he was basically running a massive logistics operation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So later on, when he had to organize the massive migration out of Nauvoo, guiding thousands of people across unforgiving terrain from 1846 to 1847, all the way to the Salt Lake Valley, he already had the operational blueprint in his head.
He knew how to move cities of people because he had literally already done it across an ocean.
Precisely.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. We've established his grit, right? He arrived in the Salt Lake Valley on July 24th, 1847.
Yep.
And he was officially sustained as president of the church on December 27th of that same year.
Right.
We know he survived mobs. We know he built cities out of literal desert dirt. But when you examine his personal philosophy, like how he actually governed his family and his community, it just shatters that mold of the stern, uncompromising frontiersman.
It really is a paradox of frontier resilience.
Yeah.
Because, you might assume that surviving such a hostile environment requires becoming harder.
Right, more rigid, less tolerant of fun or frivolity.
But Brigham actively chose to break the generational cycles of sternness that he was raised in.
Because his own childhood was entirely devoid of joy and art.
It was very bleak.
He once recounted, and this is a quote, "I had not a chance to dance and never heard the enchanting tones of the violin until I was 11 years of age."
Just incredibly strict.
Yeah, but rather than passing that strictness down to his own kids, he completely flipped the script. He refused to subject them to that kind of, quote, unnatural training.
His instructions for parenting are actually remarkably modern.
They really are.
He insisted that his children shall go to the dance. He said they should study music, read novels, and engage in activities that would, and I just love this phrasing, expand their frames, add fire to their spirits, improve their minds, and make them feel free and untrammeled in body and mind.
Untrammeled in body and mind. That is beautiful. And if you're listening to this and thinking about your own kids, his advice on dealing with children's energy is such a fascinating biological observation for the 1800s.
It's way ahead of its time.
He warned parents to never get fretful or out of temper. He explained that children possess so much vitality that, quote, their bones fairly ache with strength.
Their bones fairly ache with strength.
I mean, anyone with a toddler knows exactly what that means. Because they are so full of life, they literally cannot sit still.
Right.
And he said a parent's duty is not to punish that energy, but to always sympathize with them and soothe them.
He was recognizing childhood development in a way that really predates modern psychology.
Yeah.
And this expansive view, it extended directly into his advocacy for women, too.
Which is wild for the mid-19th century.
Oh, yeah. Victorian gender norms were incredibly restrictive then. But Brigham Young actively pushed those boundaries.
Yeah.
He stated that sisters ought to have the privilege to study various branches of knowledge.
And he was highly specific about what they should study.
Very specific. He said they should study law, they should study medicine, or physic, as it was called back then.
Physic, right.
And that they should become good bookkeepers.
Okay, I have to be honest. I'm struggling to reconcile this a bit.
I get that.
You're telling me this guy was a hardened pioneer who enforced a massive, brutal migration across the plains, yet he was lecturing people not to yell at toddlers and pushing women to go to medical school.
It sounds contradictory, I know.
It sounds a bit like historical revisionism. Like, did he actually practice this, or was this just pulpit rhetoric designed to sound enlightened?
It's a completely fair question. But the sources show it wasn't just rhetoric, it was systemic policy.
Really? Policy?
Yeah. He actively sent women from Utah to medical schools back east so they could return as certified physicians.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
His reasoning was entirely pragmatic and theological. He believed that pursuing rigorous intellectual and professional fields enlarged a woman's sphere of usefulness for the benefit of society at large.
Right.
And crucially, he said that it answered the design of their creation.
So he viewed stifling women's education as an actual waste of divine potential.
Exactly. For Brigham, the harshness of the outside world clarified the need for an internal sanctuary.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if the world outside is violent and unforgiving, your internal community cannot survive if it is also cold and rigid. You survive the desert by cultivating intellectual freedom, warmth, and joy within your walls.
That makes so much sense. And that philosophy of cultivating life, it didn't just stop at the borders of his community either, did it?
No, it extended to the environment, and even to the Native Americans who were already inhabiting the West.
Which, given the era, is another massive departure from the norm.
Huge departure.
Because the standard 19th century American approach to native populations was, quite frankly, violent displacement.
Yeah, it's just brutal.
But Brigham strictly instructed his people to treat the Indians with kindness. He warned them against harboring revengeful or vindictive feelings.
His directives were explicit on this. He told his people to feed and clothe them, to never turn them away hungry, to teach them husbandry, and to bear with them in patience.
But how did he actually enforce that? I mean, you have thousands of traumatized pioneers who have just been driven from their homes by mob violence. They are quite literally starving. And then, say, someone steals their horse.
Right.
How do you convince an armed pioneer not to pull a trigger in that situation?
By changing the calculus of survival. Brigham made it a firm rule. He said, never consider a Native American's life as an equivalent for petty stealing.
Wow.
He was essentially telling them that a human life is worth infinitely more than a horse or a sack of flour.
That is a very evolved way to look at it.
It is. But practically speaking, he also understood that vengeance costs more than bread.
Ah, pragmatism again.
Right. A cycle of frontier violence would wipe out his fragile settlements. He engineered a society based on coexistence rather than conquest, demanding that his people absorb the friction of cultural clashes through diplomacy and shared resources.
He applied that same sense of sacred stewardship to the literal dirt they were standing on, too. He had this beautiful philosophy about daily work.
Yeah, his views on labor are fascinating.
He believed that happiness depends on doing your work well, and that no matter how humble the toil, shoveling dirt, planting seeds, it becomes a part of your daily worship.
This naturally formed his views on environmental sustainability. He commanded the saints to, quote, keep your valley pure. Keep your towns as pure as you possibly can.
Keep the valley pure.
Yes.
Yeah.
He wanted them to build cities, gardens, orchards, and vineyards.
And the motivation wasn't just agricultural yield, which is what you'd expect from a survivalist.
Right.
He wanted them to make the earth so pleasant that they could look upon their labor with pleasure, and so that angels may delight to come and visit your beautiful location.
Building heaven out of the dirt.
He was quite literally trying to do that, but he also had the practical wisdom to add a caveat. He told them to labor, but not so as to injure yourselves.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Brigham Young was designing an ecosystem.
Yeah.
Today, we talk endlessly about work-life balance, environmental stewardship, holistic education, restorative justice.
All the modern buzzwords.
Right. But Brigham Young was implementing these concepts in the 1800s because he understood that brute strength is brittle. A community built purely on rigid survivalism will eventually shatter under the pressure of starvation and isolation.
It'll just crack.
Exactly. Brigham's empathetic policies created a social fabric thick enough to withstand those exact pressures.
He didn't just teach them how to survive the desert, he taught them how to make it flourish. And he was absolutely relentless about that survival.
Relentless is the perfect word.
He famously summed up their journey by saying, we have been kicked out of the frying pan into the fire, out of the fire into the middle of the floor, and here we are, and here we will stay.
I love that quote. Here we will stay.
Yeah. He said, God has shown me that this is the spot to locate his people, and here is where they will prosper. And he also noted, I have the grit in me, and I will do my duty anyhow.
That phrase perfectly captures the definitive measure of the man. Yeah. Absolute, unyielding grit paired with a profound, tender heart for his people. And he maintained that exact focus to his very last breath. Despite all the temporal empire building, all the cities founded across the West, when he passed away on April 29th, 1877, his final words on his deathbed were simply, Joseph.
Joseph.
Just calling out to his friend.
Right.
So, after looking at all these sources, what does this all mean?
It means that true, enduring leadership is a really rare combination. It requires the grit to step into the middle of the floor when you've been kicked out of the fire and declare, here we will stay.
Yeah.
But that grit is entirely meaningless if it isn't paired with an expansive empathy, a genuine desire to see children dance, to see women's minds expanded, to keep the earth pure, and to treat outsiders with unmerited kindness.
It takes us right back to that hot August day in Nauvoo.
Yeah.
6,000 people in sheer crisis. They needed a miracle, and they absolutely got one.
They did.
But they also got a man who had spent his life in the crucible preparing for that exact moment. A man tough enough to stop a hostile takeover and gentle enough to make sure the children had music to dance to. That's spot on.
So think about your own life for a second. Who's the person you know that inspires you to act with both relentless determination and profound kindness? And when your own power vacuum inevitably opens up, when you are the one called to step out of the frying pan and into the fire, how will you lead? Will you just survive the chaos, or will you build something beautiful enough for angels to visit? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us for this day in his story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in his story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.